We are going to be here for a couple of hours hanging out, and Ethan and Barb follow me at 3:15. So stick around. We'll have a short break between my session and Ethan and Barb's, and you can get some refreshments, stretch, and hang out with us for a whole day of interaction with guides and beings and these incredible concepts, and talk about all the stuff that's happening on the planet today. If you're new, welcome. We are with the Flower of Life Center for Human Evolution, and we are a volunteer organization with many, many projects. We are focused on raising human consciousness, which tends to affect everything that we have happening today, I personally believe. We do have a kids movement. I know a lot of you are familiar, and that is expanding and growing. We have so many incredible kids around the globe who participate on a meeting twice a month. We have Weekend in Wizardry, which is our in-person event, and we are getting ready to launch our mentorship program, which is one-on-one guidance and facilitation with a mentor of who is, we'll say, is suited especially or chosen especially for your child in whatever area they're interested in or pursuing or naturally gifted in. Really excited to be launching that very soon, so watch for it. If you're not familiar with my work, I am a trance channel. I've been doing this for quite some time now, and I have a huge backlog of videos on YouTube. So if you go over to the Awaken Empowered Expo YouTube channel, you will find all of the history of those videos that you can peruse, and there are chock full. My channelings tend to be very deep and rich with a lot of information. But also I find that the guides are progressing us forward. So even before what we're experiencing now, even going back into 2020, 2019, there was this, I think, interesting kind of story of what and why was about to happen. And you'll find that if you go back and listen to the channelings. I think they can be very supportive in that way. But I also take questions. And let's make this as interactive as possible and use this time to the fullest advantage. I'm happy to personally take any questions that you have before I channel. I'm going to spend just a short bit of time catching everyone up on the themes and, my personal take on the messages and things that have been coming in. So if you do have a question for me before I start the trans-channeled experience, post it in the chat. But denote that you want to ask it of me versus the guides. And then we'll start taking those questions in a queue for when I bring the guides in. And we'll bring a variety, of beings, guides, collectives, those best suited to both answer your questions as well as provide a general message today to help us with whatever we most need to know. All right. My work also has a couple of things going on. In addition to the YouTube videos, I do a Inner Circle monthly channeling. And I know a lot of you out there are in the Inner Circle. So these are additional messages above and beyond the ones that I do here on Facebook and that eventually get edited and posted to YouTube. These can be really specific and tailored to what we're experiencing on the planet today in a more, we'll say, narrow focus. And there's a group around these messages that's incredible. And I know so many of us feel, the pressure, the heaviness. We feel alone and separate of each other. We may be going through, challenging circumstances like Texas here in the United States. And, I look at this Inner Circle community as a group of supportive energy, people who are in your area or otherwise who are here to support you through these transitions, health or physical or, financial and all of these things. It's just incredible. It's a blessing that this group has come together. And I am offering the book. So if you're not familiar, I do have the manuscript of my first book dolling out for free on my website on a built-in book reader. It's called Epitome, and it's a huge transmission. We are forming groups to discuss, and it's another, I think, incredible tool or resource for us at this time. All right, and I'm going to bring in some stuff that I've been noticing in the editing as well as I've been diving in, really spending a lot of time editing the book. So with that, I always want to start with a personal story or experience because, unlike some others, I often do question, why am I here in this position? Who am I to be, channeling for people and be looked at as a a teacher or even a leader in this movement at all? And I'm so grateful and blessed for that. But I do question at times because I go through my own stuff, and just like you guys struggle with what's happening in the world, what happens in my body, what's going on in my own family. And these are all things that I think continue, regardless of your level of connection, or let's say ascension. And that was something that came into the book reading this week, is that ascension is a never-ending process. So we often think of it as an end goal, somewhere we're supposed to be. And there's some really harsh judgment, I think, about that fact that until we reach a certain threshold of ascension, we cannot be, or do a certain thing. And I think this is really what, on a grander scale, we are unwinding to become more collectively focused. And so for me, this took an interesting turn this past week as I was making breakfast one day in my kitchen. And, I'll just disclose in all transparency that I can't call myself 100% vegan. I know there's some stigma around that in certain circles and communities. When I started a channel, everything in my life changed. And the first thing that went out the door was toxins. I became very meticulous on organic, pure foods, where they're sourced from, sustainability, all of these things. And still today, go to great lengths to ensure that everything that goes into my body is pure and clean. I could not eat meat anymore. When I first started to channel, that means chicken, beef, pork, no judgment here, just went out the window. And I have had periods, long periods actually, where I've been 100% raw vegan and just eating raw food. Then I've brought cooked back in, and I kind of flow with this interesting diet from time to time. And I have brought in fish at times. But this morning that I'm speaking of, I was making myself an egg. I decided to make myself an egg. And as I was looking at this, preparation of the egg, I'd started this whole kind of process in my mind about, was it okay for me to be doing this? And what does this mean for me spiritually? And I started to judge and compare and think about all of the conversations around food and, which I think is a big topic today, obviously. And I think of someone like Ethan, who we all know eats green sludge every day. If you don't know, he does. Sorry, I'm going to call you out. And it's easy to look at someone like that and say, my gosh, they're more evolved than me, or haven't, been able to reach this certain threshold of doing this. And this whole line of questioning, I started to feel pretty crappy about myself, to be honest, and heard this voice as if someone was standing behind me, literally in the kitchen, say, trust your transitions. Such a simple, 3-word sentence, trust your transitions, yet so profound that it carried with me throughout the next couple of weeks, where trust your transitions became not only a gateway to my personal acceptance and in knowing what my body requires at certain times and adjustments with energy, as well as letting go of this constant striving for something, where we're getting out of the realm of looking at myself as, a dark reptilian for doing something that wouldn't be approved by someone else, just became this interesting analogy for how we may look out at the world and judge others. So as this is all happening, many of you I know are in my inner circle courses, which is another level area that you can get involved with the channeled content. And the current one, which is about to come to a close in a couple of weeks, is called Initiation, and it is exclusively with Mary Magdalene. And she's been talking about this incredible light technology that exists in our aura. We have been going into detail on the whole technology, these very subtle fields, how they work together, getting definitions on them. We have been doing breath work and activations to bring them back online. it's really been this kind of incredible journey into an insight into how she and others in her timeline were able to regenerate their physical bodies using light. And so we got to the transmission last Monday, which is where she was meant to ground this and bring an understanding of what she calls a regenerative light source and plasma sun body into our physical existence. Now, I don't want to interpret this for the hundreds of people who are in the course, because I think everyone is multidimensional and diverse, and channeling is a quantum activity that we're all meant to take personal meaning from. But I can't help but share my personal experience of the channeling itself, because it's such a crescendo point in this entire transmission where you might think, wow, she's really going to give us the instruction manual for how to do this, step-by-step understanding of how to go back in time and bring our bodies back into these beautiful, essences that, from past, in childhood. And the simplicity of this message for me personally was that there was no ego involved in this whatsoever. First of all, it was a completely different timeline that they were on, where the societal pressures to be or look a certain way, to do something the same as everyone else, was really not what it is today. So they did not carry the amount of resistance, let's say, and lack of self-love and respect that we do today. Yet, at times in their evolution, they were called into meditative practice, stillness, and silence, simply to let go of whatever was there and to be an allowance of their body's own rejuvenation process. Because to have put some expectation in the way, or to use these incredible tools to rid the body of something or change it in some way the mind believes, would never have worked, nor was it their intention. They were working with something that was meant to support their service in the world. And they trusted that they came with a divine plan. And this body was a vehicle to allow that plan to unfold. So if they were meant to be in a physical body 200, 300, 600 years, if they were to be in non-resistance, non-judgment, and allowance, their bodies could sustain whatever was necessary. They could become more resilient. And I think this is a level of awareness that is really, really difficult for us to achieve, yet the message is so simple. So as this is coming in, I'm editing the book, of course, and those of you who are following along know that some of the latest chapters have been about neutrality and what that is, the ego, and how we work with the ego, and really moving into a collective perspective, how we work with light. And so the Pleiadians in the book have this, and there are many, many incredible, we'll say, quotes or statements, and this is one that I'm attempting to live by. They say, if we can be in a state of observance, awareness, and still participate in experience, we will master the amount of light that we can work with in any scenario. And that can be with ourselves. The more that we are both interacting with and observing ourselves simultaneously allows light to pour in. That can be in conversation with another, or communication with a group of humans, whatever it may be, every day-to-day scenario. What we're striving for is to be the observer and be interacting. So light, let's talk about that for a minute, because this is what Mary Magdalene is alluding to. We have this light technology that does the work for us if we will allow it. So it does not only support us, our physical bodies, our assignments, manifestation, but it's how we hold space for others. the amount of light that we are able to hold can spill over into the collective and touch other aspects of experience. And so this is kind of what we're negotiating right now, our ability to hold our light. But it has a lot to do with the ego. And so the Pleiadians also allude to the fact that we were seated in a love-based frequency. Now, we don't even understand what that truly means because we are attempting to rectify love in the outer world. But until we understand that we are this love, sharing it with others, we really can't align ourselves properly with the ego, with neutrality. Love-based frequency is neutrality. They are the same thing. So if we can find, or let's just even step back and say, observe these times in our life when we're judging, criticizing, contemplating that we're going down the wrong path, and slightly shift the focus of our thought or question that line of thinking, we are opening a bandwidth of consciousness to allow more light in. In these moments, we are the observer as well as interacting. And so this chapter on ego and collective consciousness took things a bit further. Because here we are in this time of great polarity where I think identity is such an important part of what we're unwinding and awakening to, with a lot of restrictive thought. We are finding that we're being defined in certain ways. And I alluded to this a bit on my Facebook wall this past week with a short quote from the Pleiadians where they say, criticism is born of assumption. And so we know there are so many examples of this right now. If you are a vaxxer, you are this way. If you're an anti-vaxxer, you're this way. If you vote for one president, you are this. If you vote for another, you are this. There's a lot of interesting terminology and kind of focusing people into these very restrictive thought patterns and identities, which really goes against the grain of who we truly are and what we're meant to be in the world. And it can put us in defense mode. Okay, so if we don't know self-love, if we aren't the observer and interactor of our own thought and reality, then we aren't aligned in such a way that we can heal it in the collective, or we can be a facilitator of awareness and interaction in others. So I'm going to talk about this one kind of fun example that was brought into the book, and the guys are talking about the water cooler. If a place of business, the water cooler is kind of that area where everyone hangs out and gossips and sometimes complains about the boss or other employees or whatever that may be. And this is a collective environment. It's an energy. It's a collective consciousness that's being created. So sometimes when we walk into those environments, we hang out at the water cooler, we have to modify our identity just to be there. And we might find that even without conscious awareness, we're in agreement with things that we don't really believe, or without responding. They said without even responding verbally or otherwise, we're still focusing on something, an energy that might not be serving. So what do you do in these scenarios? It's pretty tough, especially right now in families where belief systems are polar opposites, neighbors, communities. This is where the power of the pause and the question really comes in handy. And they were saying, if there's an employee, let's say, that is the focus of gossip, showing up late to work consistently, and everyone's complaining that this employee is always late to work, shifting the direction of the conversation ever so slightly creates a change in consciousness, where a subtle question such as, does anyone know if this employee has a working car? Do they have someone at home that they are a caregiver for? Do they need a ride? As innocent as it is, and even if it's not responded to in a very noticeable physical way, it causes this inner chain of events to take place where consciousness has to ponder the situation from a completely different angle. And this is like cracking open the door where light starts to flood in. And light is information. It's where we get to look at things from a multidimensional viewpoint, a different vantage point than what we may have considered before. So back to my example, what I began to do after I heard this, beautiful message about trusting my transition was really support myself in who I am and how dedicated I am to my health, and how you really don't want to be restricted into one limited way of being or label in order to be something else. And I really started to feel, confident and aligned with, I think, a grander truth. It's a trust in myself, what I choose and the path that I'm taking, that is required for me to trust others. And at a time when we have so much lack of trust going on in the outer world, I think this is really where it has to start. Ernest Hemingway, he says, if you don't know how to trust someone, the only thing you can do is to trust them, to find out if you can or not. And this is where I think the implicit trust in what we know, who we are, what we're choosing, how we're interacting in the world has to be the vehicle for us to move into unity consciousness or more of a, let's say, collective focus. But it's also when that amount of light cracks open within us where we can look at the outer world and we can question internally. We really don't know why people make the decisions that they make, why the world is going in a certain direction, who's changing it, who's influencing it. We certainly have a lot of information to work with right now. And Mary Magdalene always explains the power of staying in the mystery of the unknown, because when we can allow that to be there, we are present with what is. And in that way, we can be far more centered than if we're constantly grasping for what's coming next. But ultimately, it's the analogy, I think, of where we stand today. And Ethan, if you watched his transmission this past week, his energy transfer, he was talking about the astrology, about how it's sort of a stalemate. We're in this weird void space where both sides are fighting up against each other, but nothing's really happening. And we had this incredible amount of snow here in Michigan last week. I think overnight we had 8-9 inches or something. And my daughter's little Chevy Malibu was parked behind my truck. And got in to back it out so I could leave the house and got stuck. And I had to move the car forward and back and reverse and forward. And, that forward back motion to really loosen up the car from the snow so I could get where I was needing to go. Such an analogy from where we are now. I think we're loosening things up inwardly. There's a lot of forward and backward motion in the outer world, but also within ourselves. I've had so many people coming to session lately who are either feeling, as I did when I first started this whole lecture about who am I to, where is this spiritual journey taking me? Feeling stuck as if they're going back in time and not seeing the amount of change that they've made. Or the flip side of this is we're becoming so overwhelmed in the information. When we dive into spiritual practice, sometimes we need to take a rest. Even if we dive into the stuff that's going on in the outer world, it's good for us to step back and take a rest. And I find those days myself. Listen, I'm channeling all week long. I'm channeling on the book. I'm doing private sessions. I'm channeling a course. I can get to the end of the week and not meditated for myself. And I can look at myself and blame what I did not get done, Or I can realize that there's a part of me that needs to ground now, right? And these are all decisions that we can judge so easily. We have to look at what we're here to do and how we are serving and how far we have come. And there's these little past notions come to the surface. If we're bringing traumas up from the past, let's say, or looking back and believing that we didn't heal something, we have to also see this as an opportunity. We never really leave past identities behind. They just come with us and alchemize into a new form. We're just pivot turning on who we were before, and we're using it in a different way. So the fact that it's there may actually be your greatest strength and something that we're meant to realize where we stand today. Do you have a question, Ethan? I see you holding the mic.
I connected with something in channeling that ended up not being so good. Every time I go to channel, I still connect with them. How do I stop that?
Well, I think everyone has a different process for this, but I think this question lends itself so nicely to everything that I've just spoken of, because often what the guides would say in session is that how we feel about and see ourselves will lend itself to how we direct in the astral. Now, this may sound like a criticism, a judgment. It's not. But ascended masters have come into my sessions where people have said, I don't know how to trust that I'm getting the best information. And they have said, until you see yourselves in the light of us, meaning we are meeting somewhere in the astral as equals, you cannot truly reach what we have to offer. And so my first suggestion is to pay very close attention to the self-talk, the criticisms, the judgments that you might carry within, because these are like magnets, I believe. In fact, I think they're vulnerabilities that lower vibrational beings look for. It's often the story that we're telling ourselves about ourselves or about our past that they tune into and utilize as the platform for communication. But also, I do still encounter at times when I'm channeling for others, lower vibrational beings. And there's a process that I go through to resonate higher, because it's inevitable at this time on the planet. We're immersed, unfortunately, in reptilian consciousness. And just because someone has an energy like that around them or contacts an energy like that, it does not mean that it is affecting them. So in other words, there's a big difference between contacting a lower vibration and allowing that lower vibration to infiltrate your energy field or impact you. So my advice is to communicate with it and then attempt to vibrate higher. Often, in my past, when I have had this happen before, I say, while I was working out this whole channeling gift, I would spend time talking to souls who had passed on, who I had encountered, who I knew weren't really feeding me relevant, good information. And I found that I was able to get incredible insights about them and how to assist them and how to help them sometimes transition if necessary, how to clear them from myself, how to recognize them. And it might be a period that you're going through where you're learning more, right, about these entities and beings. So I think our perception is this kind of precision tool that we can use when we're interacting with these things. And it's the stance and how you connect with it that is so important. Okay, so if you are in a state of fear when you're connecting with these entities, you're matching vibrations. All right, so if you can hold yourself in, it's different. It's difficult to say you should trust, because when you're interacting with a lower vibrational being, the first thought is that you can't trust your channeled ability or time traveled events. But the more you implicitly trust and have confidence in yourself, the more you will be able to direct and navigate these various encounters. In session, we could get some really, really important information about you and why this is happening and how to work with it and support it, because everybody's completely different. So hopefully that was helpful.
Okay, this next question I'm going to reword slightly just to reduce the possibility of censorship.
Uh-oh.
I have a question for Micheila. I'm recovering from the virus and have developed long, I don't know what that means, the virus, where fatigue is debilitating and breathlessness. Have your guides said anything about why we are manifesting this and what lessons it could be teaching us and how to heal, how to beat it or heal it so that I can get back to feeling better?
I think this is a great question for the guides, so I would, defer it to the channeling. I can give you my take on what's happening with the instance of physical difficulties that are going on with the virus itself. Physical is, on the earth plane, the last realm that we clear energy or manifest something. So for something to come into being in our body, it has been vibrationally gaining speed or steam for a very long period of time, whether it be within us singularly, within our lineage, or now we can see collectively on the planet. All right. So if we look back at some of the channeled messages, what the guide said about this time is that all of the physical structures on the earth were going to need to disintegrate, reorganize, and rebuild. So I do think that this is an opportunity for us to strengthen and become more resilient in our bodies. Now, at a time when we're so focused on breath and the lungs in multiple directions, there could also be no mistake. Because in a lot of the classes that I'm doing, even going back a couple of years, the guides have been teaching breath as a tool for physical realignment. Now, in terms of pain and disease and even the virus itself, I also need to stress that non-resistance and allowance, just as Mary Magdalene have been teaching, are the cornerstones of releasing disease. The Pleiadians said, and I don't want to mess this up, it was such a beautiful quote, that all of the pain and disease that exists on the planet today, the nucleus of it exists in lack of love. And we don't often think of physical disease this way. We're often striving and in resistance to what's there, striving to heal and in resistance to what is there, which creates more stress in the body. It creates kind of a, we'll say, restrictive environment so that even the breath itself is not supporting the expansion of what you need. I guess my best advice, and I certainly want to hear this from the guides later on, is to be in as much acceptance and least resistance as possible. I know that is so hard when we are fearful or uncomfortable and we are trying so hard to rid the body of something. The amount of light that you can bring in through the breath is always, I think, the most incredible healing opportunity. So if it's uncomfortable to breathe for now, allow the relaxation that you find within to be the guidance to the breath. I hope that was helpful. Time to channel? All right. Okay, so with that, we'll bring in the guides and we'll see what they have to say about all of your questions. We always get a general message first, and I am open to the highest and best beings who wish to come in today to offer whatever they believe is most important for us to hear. And then we will take questions. So feel free to answer or to post those questions in the chat, and we'll bring in whoever needs to come in to answer them. And we are going to work with the Council of Light today. I welcome them as they step in. We are the Council of Light. We are a 12th dimensional collective made of many races that not only observes the Earth transition, but is overseeing the transitions in many star systems throughout the galaxy. We especially are interested in the way that races can support other races with the wisdom of their own transitions, how they are ascending in their planets and star systems. And we've noticed that this can be cumbersome at times when a race goes through a very challenging transition, similar to the one that you are in. In other words, we are watching very intricately the way in which electromagnetic threads or vibrations are exchanged, because we only want the highest and best experience for all, knowing every race has its own set of transitions and challenges that it must go through. And they are only meant to receive what is most beneficial from all. We start here because we hold your transition in the highest regard. And we know that it is one that is collectively focused for great purpose. To have something occur that is so widespread and worldwide must tell you that the Earth is on the brink of an incredible transition. But we also want to acknowledge that where you stand today is holding a shift in perspective in the palm of your hands that we know may seem very simplistic in the way we are about to explain it, but is so profound in how we have watched others walk similar experiences. Perspective is something we first want to define, because we know that the way you see perspective can be through many definitions. It can be very physical in how you are interpreting your environment. It can be energetic in how your consciousness has reached a certain threshold or ability to work with energy. We simply see perception as an extra sensitive, or we'll say ultra sensitive, ability that is cosmic. It is holding the self as a mirror reflection of all that is seen. The part of you that comes from a grander universal energy, your oversoul, is always doing this, observing parts of itself in constant motion to share energies and support. You are meant to do this as a human. So to look out at the world and see the polarity of what is taking place actually becomes your greatest opportunity to change the Earth in the direction of your desire. Polarity itself is shown to you as an opportunity to hold space for its opposite. Not because there is some judgment of right or wrong that must be consistent throughout the entire planet, but the ability to hold space for what you desire becomes a holding tank, a container for all others to do the same. And we want to level the playing field for a moment, because we know that many of you perceive different timelines, and we have certainly spoken much about the split of timelines that is happening on the planet today, where some souls are moving in one direction or dimension and others are very stagnant in the old. Ultimately, what we believe is if you are to get deep down into the essence of every soul, what they truly crave is to experience the love that they are and the peace that is possible. There are certainly many different perspectives about the degree to which this love can be recognized or flow, as well as how peace may be perceived. Yet, if love and peace are the two consistent vibrations that exist beneath the surface of preference in any one soul, To find it within yourself is to anchor it on the planet in multiple lights. This is how powerful you are. We know this sounds very simplistic, and there are certainly challenging and difficult times that many of you face, whether it be with infrastructure or with the body or with financial systems. We also know that these structures must be based in love and peace in order to serve. If they are not serving, this is an indication that they were not built within these frequencies. To find love and peace within the self is to not rely on something beyond for what is needed to be sourced. And although this may seem difficult to reach at a time when you have focused on very, we'll say, hierarchical and community sources, it is possible to transition in the way of self-sustenance and a shared economy. But where you're headed relies upon this shared economy being built within the common respect of love and peace. So when you are holding space for yourself in the way that has been discussed in this transmission previous to our arrival, what you are doing is you are influencing a signal. You are the driving factor, the eternal magnet, and how all things that are already existent within all beings that come to support the healing of the earth show up in form. In fact, you are the architects who are building them in non-physical first so that they may arrive. So beyond this common intention of love and peace, you may perceive a great amount of difference, polarity, opinion, belief, and judgment. The question becomes, is that necessary for the earth to thrive? We certainly believe that it is a part of a race's ever-present ascension timeline. So if that polarity, if that diversity, if those varying beliefs are not there, there's nothing to consider as a soul evolves itself within an experience. What you're actually striving for is to get beyond those things, to use them as a tool of your personal decision and awakening, but always strive for the common denominator that exists within all, to see it, to acknowledge it, and especially to influence it within the self is the greatest gift that you can offer at this time. Now, we want to make one final comment, especially about the way in which resources being distributed on the planet and great changes we see in the way of the future. We know there is great concern here. For in a hierarchical structure, the few hold more resource than the many. What you are attempting to do at this time is not to accumulate as much resource for the self to sustain in challenging circumstance, but to look at this opportunity as an ability to share as much resource as possible between all. So what we are saying is, if you stay in the frequency of love and peace, and you are accumulating resource in a way that is shared, you may find that logical new platforms, infrastructures, institutions will quickly come into being that allow everyone to benefit equally and share these resources in a way that is more abundant. But until that time arrives, know this: you are not sourcing for yourself alone. You have reached a threshold in consciousness where awakening is furthering a unified field. And that unified field is not necessarily focused on material. It is focused upon a dimensional shift that Gaia, Earth herself, has already made, that many of you are beginning to adjust to. The manifestation that comes now must come in the form of collective endeavors, where what you hold space for within the self can make incredible changes in communities and geographic regions. These can be instantaneous oftentimes, and it is not the mass meditations that you embark upon that make the greatest influence, but how you carry yourself beyond them that is most important. How you hold the frequency of what they have uncovered within you for longer periods of linear time. We ourselves, knowing we come from multiple races and are diverse in our ways and beliefs, have found that common denominator. And that is what allows us to exist in a collective state. It is what brings the richness of multiple opinions and inspired actions to our assignment. And these are all honored because they come from a place of non-competition, of non-judgment. We hold this vision for you as the Council of Light, as you are continuing to evolve in the way that many of our star systems have as well. And we're very pleased to take questions.
Question for the guides. How best can we align with our true and highest selves and what we are here to do? And do you have any information about the heart being a portal?
Yes, we are the Pleiadian Collective, and we're very pleased to offer information about your question and intention. And start by saying that this is a never-ending process. And we see some of you are at a crossroads in understanding what you are here to do and why. This could never be one thing. So the moment you accept that you are a multidimensional being subject to change and to create life to your preference, what is already within your divine plan will synchronize. You see, most of you, especially in this timeline, are carrying out a lineage where expectations and societal direction in one way or another has created a false identity. And because of this, you have been suppressing your most authentic gifts and abilities from a very young age. The things that bring you the most joy, that come effortlessly through you, must blend and synchronize with what you chose to do in the way of service. So if you begin to pursue these things, or perhaps negate what has become falsified as your identity or some expectation in the outer world, you will very gently uncover these parts of you that have always been existent through time. Yet we also want to explain that everything is divinely timed and orchestrating itself in union with all others, because as much as you are here co-creating a path and a journey that is singular, you are also immersed in collective consciousness. So what you are here to do and how you are here to serve will always call itself forward from others who are requesting it from you. So to look back on your life from this juncture and assume that you have not served is only to limit the amount of self-love and respect that your higher self already acknowledges as a part of your soul's path. Simply choosing to be a part of the earth experience at this time in and of itself is serving. But to move that higher into greater states of being and expression is to deliberately interact with what brings you joy. Now, in regards to your question about the heart, we do see it somewhat like a portal, yet might define it a bit differently. We see that the heart is a complex energetic structure, most of which many of you have only been utilizing a small fraction of. if you are to look at the heart beyond its physical function, what it is doing is creating coherence and upholding a state of unity consciousness. In this way, in a healing scenario where one is intending to shift the vibration of another, they are finding a resonant energy as an entry point to support or assist some modification or clearing. But this is not the only way that a portal itself can be opened, entered, or utilized. So we agree that the heart complex, especially as you activate what we define as the higher heart, which is a cosmic aspect of this center, it is somewhat a resonant tool of connection and finding the access to collective consciousness and those that you are purporting to work with in an astral way.
Any extra guidance on how to focus our energy to the highest good of all when the outer world seems so very stifling?
This is Mary Magdalene. What you define as the highest good of all must start somewhere within you, as self-serving as this statement sounds, because to unify as a part of any collective is to first live your highest truth. And this is why you came as a soul in a human bodysuit. To live at your highest potential was reliant upon interaction and experience with others doing the same. So we think this is the first level of healing that takes place in order to see it manifest in the outer world. In other words, if you are focused very diligently and deliberately upon living your highest potential in every experience and in every moment, you are becoming an active conduit for allowing it to unfold in the outer world. And we know this is a period of time where this is not easy because you are met with such polarity and oftentimes criticism and opposite belief systems than your own. But imagine yourself as a vehicle of light, where the way in which you interact is literally transfiguring the light of another. Not because it has to see the world in the same way that you do, but because the polarity that exists between the two of you creating conflict is evidence of a soul not living their highest truth. Because truth itself has no bearing upon opinion or belief so much as it holds itself equal to the upholding of that in another. The truth that you are actually attempting to uphold is a sacred truth. It's a unification source. You may call it God, you may call it universe, you may call it a higher power, but when it exists within you and is able to be shared is how it becomes realized by the entire planet. So to point it out in lack within yourself or within another does not fulfill this request. Because the more it is acknowledged that it does not exist, the more you're influencing the parts of you that hold it back, or the parts of others that have yet to reclaim it. And this is what we observe taking place on the planet today. There's a constant evaluation and inventory of what is not in the highest and best, as opposed to the reaching and striving to be it, not in some material way or to prove the belief that you carry is the highest and best for all, but to exist within it. So that in the way of divine feminine, for example, you are holding a compassionate and loving presence to allow all others to find it as well.
Could you expand about how we can only ascend as high as the collective is currently? What about people that incarnated in a higher vibration currently carried by the collective?
We are the Pleiadians, and this is an interesting question that is somewhat tricky to answer because, yes, we agree. There are souls who have incarnated that resonate in a higher vibration and dimension than others. In fact, what has happened on your planet for many, many years has been a difference in speed that exists between multiple humans. Vibrational speed is what we are speaking of. So ascending happens in multiple containers. There is an individual ascension process, which is a soul container. There is a higher self ascension process that we consider more earthly or within the human race. And there is an oversoul container that is observing ascension on a universal basis. But there is a somewhat calculation process for how any one container finds itself ascending. And we want to focus on the collective because this is where your question lies. If we were to look at vibrational speed as a measurement, as a numerologic measurement, what the universe might calculate is the speed of every human divided by the number of humans to find a common vibration. And vibration is an access point for dimension as well, because as dimension raises, vibration also changes. We consider this access to information or a bandwidth of consciousness. And this is why many of us have stated for quite some time that finding a mass or threshold of humans at a raise of vibration can tip the scales in the way of earthly consciousness, because it does not take an entire collective to move the planet forward at the same time. But this is where a caveat must come in. You're in an interesting time period as earthly souls, because you're not just negotiating these vibrational changes in the collective, in this container, this entire race that we speak of, but Earth herself has been very unstable and shifting vibrations as well. And these signals we know you may be aware of as the Schumann resonance coming from within her inner core. She is responding to you just as much as you are responding to her. And there has been a deliberate attempt to try and level the vibration, not to bring those in a higher vibration down, but to support some stability in the Earth atmosphere, because she is moving between dimensions just as you are. And if vibrations are not stable, it can prevent this movement. And this alludes also to activities of her poles, for example, and shifting meridians and grid points within her. Because of this, you're finding the outer world somewhat chaotic, where realities are not stabilizing either. So the question becomes, what is it that the human race can do about this, especially those who perhaps find themselves at a higher rate of speed or consciousness? The important thing to note is that physical and non-physical exist in the same dimension. This is where we think the most important anomaly to shift your planet arrives. What we are noticing is that some of you are highly conscious, have become very diligent at spiritual practice and raising your vibration. There are beliefs and concepts that you understand about the outer world, but have yet to move into a full physical structure that matches that consciousness. And this is how within singular humans, varying speeds exist as well. And we know what we speak of is not easy to achieve, especially in a linear way. But note this, where you are headed is a different dimension that requires less physical focus and material in order to achieve. And this also alludes to the fact that relaxation and breath and allowance is a part of your process. To test the waters and step outside of the bounds of your safety nets. To choose the direction of your timeline in the way of your belief. In this way, you will negotiate between these varying speeds and anchor a common platform that many others may arrive upon consecutively.
Who is Yahweh, and can you speak a bit about the origins of the Jewish religion, its truth and distortions, and potential connection to the Anunnaki and/or Orion star system?
Yes, we are the Christ Collective. There are many of us who come in and assemble as a one voice. We come from multiple directions and various religions. We hold a unification to acknowledge all of your questions, both coming from the acknowledge all parts of your questions, both coming from the Jewish religion as well as the history of Yahweh or Yeshua. We look at this being or dimension as a frequency. Yahweh, even those who refer to Yeshua, are referring to not an individual or a historic experience, but are pulling into a dimensional reality that was existent on the planet that can be brought back in this time. Now, it is not because that time was pure and rid of any discordance, but because master beings of light, intergalactics and ascended masters, chose to ground. They are often looked at as human, but had intergalactic characteristics and powers. Not in the way that you may expect today, an intergalactic to arrive to Earth and look very different than you. But there was perhaps a greater bandwidth to receive straight from God's source as a conduit to Earth. Now, the Jewish religion itself, not unlike many others, is a subset or interpretation of what we speak. It is somewhat like the timeline you exist within today. There will be many in the future of where you stand that will tell the story of the journey you walked. And although it is a unique interpretation, it may represent the feelings and experiences that you had, or it may not. And in many ways, we see these various religions as very collective interpretations that at times may have been necessary to ensure that all beings were ascending in diverse ways. But we know that religion itself, not unlike many other areas of study or teaching, become vulnerable to beings from other planets or lower dimensions that may use these stories to their advantage. Now, we actually believe that what you're asking about the Jewish religion and the Anunnaki is not different than most other religions and how they have been infiltrated and changed and how the message has become something other than its original state. We actually believe this happens on the planet in a very rampant way. And there is a reptilian influence that drives this, because if you are able to step into any belief system and utilize it as a tool of awareness to infiltrate the consciousness of the masses. It is a tool of manifestation. It either strengthens or suppresses something that may be purposeful for your race. We don't necessarily see that the Anunnaki itself is the only race that had any influence on this religion. But we do know there was a time in which this race became focused on religion as a tool to ensure that what it desired the planet to be and how the resources it was tapping into to share with themselves could become easier gained. And in addition, shift the energy of how humanity's blueprint was able to manifest instantaneously. So we think that not all of these teachings in this religion and others are influenced in this way wholly and completely. We think that your consciousness is raising to the degree where you are able to uncover the hidden and scripted areas of these teachings that have either yet to be shared or purposely have been hidden or we'll say distorted from the truth. Now the question becomes, could there be any one truth? And in the way of Yahweh, we know that truth itself is the ever-present energy that we are all bathed within. And what that means is our interpretation of anything must be truth. This is something that may not be seen as evident in most religions, the Jewish faith included, but nonetheless is something that we acknowledge as the most important thing that we wish to share in regards to this question. Because the more that you see yourself in the light of this God essence, this truth, the more the truth itself will be shared or seen. It is a vibrational matching process. And many of you are unwinding the genetic predispositions that were seeded within you through words and phrases and chants and symbols that were meant for your highest good, but became distorted in the way of someone else's truth.
I'm recovering from the virus and the post-virus syndrome, which is where you can have symptoms past the acute phase of the infection. To the guides, I'm wondering why we manifested it as a collective and what lessons it is teaching and how can we get our bodies back to health.
This is Babaji, and I'm very pleased to invite him in. When we look at this disease on your planet, we must acknowledge that although it has been very narrowly defined and some are associating with very similar symptoms, it does not and cannot occur the same in any one individual. So for us to share some healing protocol for your current journey is to assume that you are all struggling with the same instance of some disease when in fact we do not see it in this way. What we acknowledge in a very loving and gentle way is that you are all coming to terms with the impermanence of your soul. Not in a fearful way that you are easily vulnerable and yet to transition, but how a soul that is collectively meeting an experience can mold it and shape it through its own manifestation process. In other words, throughout time, humanity has become very enamored with teachings, definitions, diagnoses, and trusting outside of the self the way a healing process must go. What we have seen in many instances is this often leads to more discordance. And although a soul may heal what it is they have manifested, another instance of it may arrive in a different form later in life, or maybe experienced in the way of some emotion or fear or trauma that exists within the experience itself, but is never considered a part of its healing. And we bring this to your attention now because it is the emotional perspective that we think has to be brought to the planet as a whole. We know that it is your propensity to focus on physical and material that has brought you into the third dimensional experience you're having. Yet, who you're becoming could never see it as a manifestation in the body. Who you're becoming has to see it from a holistic vantage point. That what manifests in the body, a microcosm of Earth itself, comes from some imbalance, either at the level of material or emotion, that's causing a wave pattern, a form to come into being. Now, if we wind this around to the way that we see humanity being led, consciously or unconsciously, into outcomes, we see the underlying vibration that you are butting up against as being fear. And we say this again with the utmost respect, knowing that fear is the most difficult manifestation in the body that you can face as a physical soul. Yet, its presence will cause a state of resistance that is very difficult for you to maneuver around. So, our primal recommendation for those of you facing these circumstances is to step outside of the body and get into the innate consciousness, the inner child, or the part of you that is responding to some outer communication that is drawing its attention into a very collective and massive scenario that is being manifested. In other words, again, and with great respect and honor, we see this as a collective manifestation, one that has been directed and continues to be led. Yet, we acknowledge the reality of it in the body. And we want to make another suggestion to those of you who are in this state. There is a light source that exists within the center of each cell. It is a spectrum of color. It is a vibrant core that glows and shares its energy with all other parts of the body. In disease, any disease, this light is dimmed. So what you are striving for is to bring as much light into the body as possible so that it may mimic these patterns of light and vibrationally shift anything that exists there that does not match its brilliance. For you at the physical level, this may be in the form of food or nourishment that is ingested. These high quantities and qualities of light mimic that within your own cells and will bring it to the surface in multitude. But another way that we believe this can be ascertained is through herbal remedies and earth. Those that hold the highest vibrations are the best to support the body. And beyond this, focus your attention as much as possible on breaking the chain of thought that's carrying you into this collective scenario. Because the more it is acknowledged, the more that it is fought over, the more that it is focused on, the stronger its position will be. All of you are individuals, and this means that you will resonate with different techniques. These may be meditative techniques or relaxation techniques. But to spend deliberate time and focus in ways beyond or in directions beyond the one that this disease exists would benefit all of you at this moment to rid it from your planet.
Many of the ascended masters who come through lived thousands of years ago and were trained from a younger age in supportive communities. Many of us today are coming to these energetic learnings later in life without such support. So how can we adapt these learnings in an accelerated time frame without being able to spend days, weeks, months in meditation to achieve our remembrance and utilization of our advanced energy technology?
This is the Atlanteans, and I welcome them as they step in. We hear your question and we hear your urgency in ensuring that new communities thrive and are born on the earth. But we do remind you that everything starts in non-physical before it is made manifest in a physical way. And to this end, we already see the process taking place. The desire that you have to become more connected as a conscious community comes from the fact that the conscious community itself is already an existent potential within your collective field. The problem that we see is its ability to land is where you must focus. In other words, what you're resistant to that stands in the way of your progress when focused upon is the same as the example with disease spoken of a moment ago. Many of you with a higher bandwidth of consciousness who understand that communities or enlightened structures are the wave of the future have been immersed in a frequency field and pool of knowledge that is constantly showing what stands in the way of its progress. And this takes more of your creative energy to understand than allowing what's already existent in your field to come through. In other words, what we're suggesting is that you make more time, space, and availability to allow what is there to flow through unencumbered. And that means stepping outside of the resistant force of blame and finger pointing that many of you continue on a daily basis, because this is a vibrational act. But even though these conscious communities exist, we want to make a couple of points about linear time and what it would take to put them into motion, as well as the changes on the planet that are yet to take place to allow them to fully ground. Remember first that linear time is changing. The only reason you associate with linear time is it is a mental capacity to store knowledge, to understand what was past, what is present, what was future. But it has been taken beyond that in a very unconstructive way, where time is calculated as to what was known before in order to create something beyond. This is a vibrational anomaly that you must get out of, where you are putting conditions in the way of how much time, material, or effort it will take to ground and land these creative environments, because these are what hold you back from truly sourcing what you need in order for it to happen. But also, the intention, going back to the message of the council, finding that resonance of peace and love is far more important than all of these physical actions. When you have an intention, it is a driving factor in how the universe conspires to support. So we believe that keeping your intention alive while humanity is going through a pivotal turning point in consciousness is how you do not dim the light on what you've already created. In other words, intentions vary, and there are still human souls who are going through mass awakenings where they will shift out of competition and self-service into a grander collective vision, into more a state of unity consciousness. And we'll weave in the answer of the Pleiadians as well, where there is a universal calculator making a measurement of all vibrational speeds and leveling the playing field. This is what is going on in the present moment. And we know it feels as if you are not progressing, but it is an important adjustment period where some of you may be stalled and in wait for others to catch up to the ideas that you have. But if you lose faith and hope that those ideas can actually come into fruition, this is the most dangerous way to be. Because the faith, hope, and intention that you carry keeps these vibrations alive. And what you may find is you are taking small and deliberate steps, even conceptually, for example, that are anchoring more. And this is our final conclusion. Who you are becoming in this moment, in the acknowledgement that these communities must come to the planet for humanity to thrive, is the most important focus. Because they will inevitably show themselves because you are making the deliberate effort to do so.
I'm really drawn to crystals and started collecting them. How can I use crystals to help with healing, ascension, and spiritual growth?
We are the Lemurians, and we're very pleased to answer this question. Well, you see, those who are drawn to crystals that know or have an inner belief that they are meant to work with them are communicators of them. They are either matching their frequency or they are using them in some way as an extension of their own technology. No one is meant to do this in the same way. And we respect very much those who place definitions around certain crystals and their use, because this is like a historic capture of their own Akashic record and how you may make use of them as well. But what we suggest is that you leave room for your own experience and analogy, because crystals are just as dynamic and ascending as humans are. They are a consciousness. They are a part of Earth, and Earth herself is becoming higher dimensional. This means that the energy they carry is becoming stronger. And some of these definitions may change. So we encourage you to use your intuit, your inner feeling and inner knowing, and to receive feedback within your own body or those of others and how they heal in order to truly use them in the best way. And what you may find is you are becoming an Akashic recorder yourself, a historic part of how their legacy will be left behind in some very advanced way.
Can you please elaborate on the beings within the inner earth, who the beings within the inner earth are?
Yes, we are the Pleiadians, and it would be almost impossible for us in one transmission to take an inventory of all beings that reside within the inner earth. And we want to explain it this way. If you were to look at Earth through a microscope, a cosmic microscope, you may see dimensional layers existent through, around, and within her. You are just experiencing one of those dimensions as a human being. For example, we might say that crystals themselves or earth elements exist in another dimension, a separate dimension than humans. And as you interact with them, you are bridging dimensions. They may be bringing to you some aspect of cosmic knowledge or energy that you are not able to access in your own. And so the inner earth is a complex, we'll say, container of intergalactic beings and multidimensional layers that has been present since the beginning of time. Many of those who travel within the inner earth have interacted with certain beings. And these beings, stories are told and they are recognized by a certain lineage or a name. we think this is only a small fraction of what humanity is yet to uncover. In fact, the crystalline core itself, the diamond core of Earth, is shifting vibrationally and inviting new beings in all of the time. This is a dynamic shift from what it was before. We know that some of you acknowledge or understand that there are lower dimensional beings, reptilian beings, that exist within the inner Earth. And these are some we speak of. They're not all high vibrational, similar to your own human race. There are variances and differences in speed and intention. But the most positive expression we want to bring forward about this is that there is an exit point that has become available where lower dimensional beings, such as those who are reptilian, are actually purging from the inner Earth because of the influx of plasmic light and intergalactic beings that are higher vibrational. It's somewhat like a displacement process where the high angelic quality or intergalactic vibration that is now existent within these dimensions is not suitable for those who do not exist within them. And this perhaps could be another reason that some of you are experiencing a higher instance of reptilian activity on the surface of the Earth, or those who are healers are seeing them clear because they deliberately, even physically at times, are. They're shape-shifting into a new form. They are preparing to reintegrate into their own race and star system. And this happens all the time throughout the galactic universe. Those planets and stars that are open to receiving intergalactic races and beings as a melting pot of genetic variances will at times go through these turbulent changes. But we think this is a positive one for within Gaia and for those of you who exist upon her.
Are multidimensional selves present on Earth? Are we meeting our multidimensional selves here on Earth in another person's body?
We are Metatron. We're very pleased to break this question down, which we think lends itself very well to multiple definitions and explanations that we will concisely offer. You are an intergalactic being, a multigalactic energy experiencing itself in multiple forms. But if you were to only look at the Earth as this way, it would negate a soul and human presence that was your reason for coming. So in other words, what you are attempting to do as a soul in a human body is to both bring in as much galactic energy to the Earth as possible, but also recognize it in diverse forms and honor and acknowledge it on the Earth plane as well. Not because Earth is meant to change into something that is similar to star systems that intergalactic beings exist on. Just like any planet or star system, it will continue to evolve, and the beings upon it will evolve as well. Perhaps what you are truly speaking of is an ability. You may be familiar with the concept of an oversoul, which is an aspect of yourself in a holistic viewpoint that sees its multiple incarnations throughout the galaxy. It takes inventory in real time of all of the experiences you're having at once. This would not be possible from a human viewpoint, but it is somewhat like the activity of Source. The oversoul and Source energy are very closely connected vibrations. And so your multigalactic self is somewhat like a source field. What you are learning and experiencing and gaining wisdom from in other dimensions can actually support you here and now. It is just that oftentimes you become so narrow in your self-perception that you do not believe this is possible. It is not necessarily the advanced gifts and abilities that are the most important in a multi-galactic sense, but the amount of awareness and the amount of information that you can ascertain that brings new viewpoints and creative abilities to the planet that you are striving for. And the connection between you and another's oversoul can influence or stifle this ability, because you are connected in a sacred design as one. But this also, in and of itself, has been broken. So the more intergalactic you come, the more space you hold for diversity in others, which is ultimately the cosmic parts of you on other planes of existence, calling themselves to the planet as a mirror reflection of your inner beauty.
Someone who was like a mother figure to me passed on recently, and I'm wondering if there's something she would like to share with the collective.
We're Anna, and we will share this. Every soul that passes from the planet goes through a very intricate process of reuniting with Source. It makes its own decisions and sometimes wants to observe deeper in ways that take a longer linear period of time to transition, and sometimes will linger and remain very close to the earth, because there is something that is seen in the transition that desperately wants to be shared. But it is not the goal of that soul to change the earth reality from that standpoint. They are preparing to capture a grander vision and utilize it as a tool for the next set of decisions they are making. And in this way, we see that this soul is focused on understanding better itself through the eyes of what's happening in the world, replaying and reviewing its timeline experiences and interactions as if they are the person other than self, and now seeing itself as the love that it is. So if there is one message that we can share, it would be this. In the vision of all things that is seen by a transitioning soul, there is an immediate awareness, a sense of love for the self that cannot be unseen. It is as if the earth's vision, in all of its imperfections, becomes a sea of beauty that has never been seen before. And to capture this vision right now is to transcend and transition your own soul on the earth plane, which is possible in the here and now without leaving a physical body.
I've only been able to love myself as a premature baby. I was feeling abandoned in all ways. My life hasn't been good. I've had PTSD since birth. Any advice on loving myself now?
Archangel Gabriel steps in. Well, it is interesting to us that the challenges faced by a young child become the reasons why there is some imperfection that stands in the way of our beauty or truth. Yet you are looking at this time in your life with such reverence that it does make you special. This is a clue to you as to how every instance of your life can be this opportunity, regardless of what has happened to your soul or with others. There is a part of you that is holding space for an internal understanding to grow you forward in this love. Because it is not what you have done wrong that diminishes your light, but how you see the opportunity to accept yourself regardless, that love abounds. This is how we see all of you today. We see multiple opportunities throughout daily experience, regardless of mistakes that are made or ways that the self is viewed, to regardless of those instances, love the self anyway. As ascended masters, this is how we have become who we stand to be today. It is not that we have done great feats of magic or service on the planet alone, but that we have also made the mistakes that you have, and regardless of that fact, can see nothing but pure love, can go deeper within and parent ourselves back into the organic love of Divine Mother herself. The way that you would perceive a friend in the midst of crisis, the way that you would care for your own infant at times of discomfort. These are the very simplistic tools for you to acknowledge the love within. You are your own caretaker, and you are a temple of beauty that needs to be tended to with the same amount of care. That care is not physical to any degree. It is most certainly emotional and vibrational, and will hear the inner voice resonate through its walls, like the echo of the voice from the side of a cliff sending back the acknowledgement of what it has spoken. Your body, your mind, your spirit carries every message. So let them be kind. Let them be loving and supportive of who you are, so that they may become the more natural sound that exists in an effortless way that you do not have to strive for any longer.
I'd like to get more facts about the C19 vaccine for all of us so we decide if to take it or not. I'm working at a maternity ward and everyone else has taken it except me. Thank you for the answer.
We are the Arcturians, and we will certainly ground an answer as to our perspective. And we actually have a team of medical doctors. I welcome them, who are coming in from the right-hand side. What we have seen in the history of these vaccines is that they are a manifestation of your consciousness. So in other words, you believed that a physical manifestation of some medicine was required to keep you safe from some disease, and so it was that this came into existence. This is not unlike other pharmaceutical drugs, for example, medications or physical approaches that are on your planet now for health. But what you are speaking of is a shift in consciousness that begs the question, is a physical form of protective measure the best option for a light being? And becoming more light, becoming more conscious, is an extra sensitive adjustment to the outer world. There are some on the planet who are born this way, for example, crystalline children or hybrid children, and they are interacting with toxins in their environment that are lower vibrational and cause great shifts and changes within their bodies, minds, and spirits. This has always been happening to a degree on the planet, but your belief in what was before is now waning. So ultimately, what we see is you have become more extra sensitive, and especially at this time on the planet, to be approaching the DNA, which is in process of merging its physical and crystalline states, is something ill-advised, because you are shifting the entire vibration and criteria of the body to self-heal. In fact, you may be programming it to a dimension or a lower vibrational frequency that does not allow it to sustain its higher vibrational state. We know also that toxins in the environment, regardless of their form, exist in a way that is resistant. Within your body, there is an inability to communicate effectively. Organs and tissues and energy centers have lost their electromagnetic charge and connection, because toxins are skewing the vibrational frequency. It is somewhat like having an inorganic field that you step into, and it may be a very high instance of electromagnetic energy that will cause you to feel nauseous or imbalanced. When these energies are put into the body, there is an inability of the body to find its center, to find its coherence. Now, we also see another, we'll say, concerning aspect of these approaches that are widely being suggested on your planet today. And it is this. What the body innately understands how to do is regenerate itself in any situation. Disease, for example, is how a race becomes more ascended or resilient. Not because it is meant to suffer, but because the polarity of the outer world that you are meeting in others is a physical anomaly at the microbiotic level. If you put something that is foreign in the body, a program that it has to respond to, just like attention is put on something in the outer world in a way that keeps it in the same frequency, it diminishes the body's innate ability. It becomes reliant upon something, as if a spotlight has been shown on one particular activity or event. This is how we see more and more instances of these injections causing issues. And it may not show itself in one common area, because what your body is meant to do is very diverse. What all of you are working with as a DNA template is just as diverse. And also, the way that your body responds to different chemical components, toxins, and programs is also just as diverse. So know this, there is a weakness that is ever present, a potential for a weakness that we see that can cause instabilities in the body. And we are not stating this because we want to sway anyone's opinion in one direction or another. We also know that how you feel about something, your belief, is a strong proponent of how it will manifest. And there are so many new technologies and advanced tools coming to the planet to recalibrate the body with sound and light, that it may be inevitable that what you're experiencing today in this genetic template is going to be the contributing factor to more advanced future health protocols. Everything that comes into fruition, for example, throughout history, has had both a positive and a negative effect. It must, in order to come to a neutral. But we have become very aware that humanity is concerned about proposed side effects and that they are already showing themselves. We think this is really just a small subset of what may be potential as you walk forward through the next linear years. The connections may not be made between how the body is responding and the vaccination itself, but certainly in an inward way will be seen.
Can the guides comment on craniosacral treatment?
Yes. We are the Arcturians, and we look at this practice or modality in this way. Your craniosacral fluids are a multi-galactic elixir meant to keep you in perfect balance and harmony, working with all of the organs, tissues, and functions throughout your body as well. They also are apt to carry specific patterns or vibrations. If something is influenced in your life, paid attention to, or a trauma, for example, is not healed, this fluid or elixir will hold it in such a way that a block is formed in the body. When craniosacral practice is done, it is relieving these blocks so that the elixir itself may flow free and support not only physical healing, but also spiritual or emotional transitions. But we must acknowledge this. As we often say, humanity has barely scratched the surface of the potential of what these modalities and practices may provide. They have been somewhat physically focused, and we believe can be approached in an energetic or vibrational way beyond physical touch or manipulation. This is something that is well known from many ancient past civilizations as a tool of healing. And we think some of you who are focused in this modality are furthering it along, advancing it in a more multi-galactic sense.
Could you talk about how to activate the pineal gland?
We actually have the Dolphins and Whales stepping in. I welcome them, and they're so very pleased. We want to shed light also on the past question about the craniosacral elixir, and then we'll transition into the pineal gland because we think this is a very important addition. You see, the waters within Gaia, these incredible crystalline elixirs that exist within her cells and tissues, are just as potent healers as existent within the body. Meaning, if you are making these connections between the inner earth frequencies or elements and that of the body, you now have an ample gateway and multi-galactic channel to ensure that humans become aligned and healed. But naturally, note that some of these modalities will activate intergalactic gifts and abilities as well. The pineal gland is one that we want to touch on because we are not seers in the way that you are. We sense our environment through the sonic of our energy field. And that sonic is something that we know you are also attuned to. The pineal, although active in a way of seeing, is also a sonic technology. It is not just advancing forward your ability to see energy in an outward or inward fashion, but it is meant to accentuate your extra sensitivity and connect multi-galactic gifts together as one field of light. But to acknowledge any one practice would negate the fact that you are all diverse beings. That being said, we believe that the focus upon that center with the breath and utilizing some tool of light is very potent indeed. For example, if you are breathing in a meditative state and focusing on the pineal gland in an upward fashion, bringing light in through the crown and bathing it into the pineal, expanding it wide, can be a very simplistic practice that can cleanse and decalcify it. But there is also a physical equivalent to this, as you may know. Detoxifying the body and ensuring that you are receiving ample light in nourishment physically can be another vehicle for decalcifying the pineal gland. We also believe that, unbeknownst to many humans, the pineal holds a direct connection to the breath, and especially the throat chakra being a neighboring energy center can be a very valuable tool. This is why ancient native chants and toning were used to progress consciousness or accentuate vibration. But these ancient chants and mudras are like a sonic vibration in themselves. And within the throat chakra will vibrate up into the pineal and also have the ability to break it open. We are very pleased as ambassadors of light to work with you on these throat sonics if called upon. And there are many tools that you may choose that are to your comfort level.
Could you explain what light language is, and when we're babies, are we naturally using it, and how do we go about learning how to speak it as adults?
We are the Pleiadians. It is interesting that you would bring up a young child in the language that they are learning, because essentially there is a stage in which a part of their consciousness is attuning to the multi-galactic energy that they came from. They are orienting themselves to Earth, which is why any one language does not come easily at first, but what they are most surrounded by becomes more natural. But also, imagine a newborn child or one that is just beginning to make sound, hearing itself for the first time. There is somewhat of a surprise or an excitement that it is able to generate sound. And this is such an incredible time for a new soul to experience the feeling of its own voice, which is an intergalactic tool of alignment, and often why a young child will cry out and make sounds quite often, which are self-soothing and felt internally, not only to request something in the outer world, but to bring themselves to a state of coherence. The more that young infants and even children in the womb are sung to or exposed to the harmonic tones and sounds of music, the more they come into this ability quicker. Light languages are the languages that exist throughout the universe. They are called light as such because they exist in higher tones and frequencies than what humans are utilizing. And this is not because you cannot reach them mechanically, but it is because when strung together, they are doing more than communicating in a physical way. You are doing this as well. Human communication is not meant only for the intellect of the mind or understanding. Energy and vibration is being shared. So in a language of light, there is a new essence of vibration and energy coming to the planet to be shared. It can have the result of healing. It can activate and accentuate human vibration or consciousness. And when blended with multiple languages from a variety of races, can actually uncover your own cosmic lineage. The reason that languages of light are coming to the planet so abundantly at this time, or we'll say making a reappearance, in other words, is that your crystalline structures have become vehicles of them. In other words, you become more crystal, and this is required to speak these languages. Now, some of you are predisposed to certain genetic lineages, for example, the Pleiadians or the Sirians. And you may find that a channeled encounter will easily connect you to them to bring a language in. What we suggest is not unlike what the Dolphins and Whales have recommended about your pineal gland. The more you are apt to relax the energy center of the throat and utilize it in ancient ways, the more you will have the capacity to channel these languages of light, because this is what they are mirrored from. In fact, we believe those who chant and tone, regardless of the ancient path they are taking or language they are using, are streaming light through as they accomplish this activity. So our suggestion to you is to both relax the throat and utilize toning and chanting protocols while also connecting to channel, because this is a channeled activity and all humans are different in how they accomplish a channeled state. The more you are able to accentuate both, the better you will be able to speak these languages.
Could you conclude the session, please?
Yes, those of us who are here are in great honor and respect of your journey, and it has been our great pleasure and delight to accentuate it in our own way. We wish you many blessings and go in peace. All right.
How many chapters are planned for Epitaium? Our group in Romania is meeting on a regular basis to read, discuss, and analyze your channeled books. It's very organic and full of light experience. Love and light from Romania.
Thank you. So, believe it or not, and I always allude to this transmission as massive, it has 103 chapters. Now, will it end up that way? I'm not sure, but I think so. And we're about not quite midway. And yes, my goal is to still offer 2 chapters a week. I can't promise that that's going to be perfect in terms of breaks and, things like that. I have encountered chapters that have been pretty intense. As you know, a couple weeks ago, I put out just one. It was the chapter on neutrality, and it about did me in. It was so full, and I explored it so much that taking on another one just felt like too much. So hopefully that helps, and thank you for getting together and reading along. Appreciate it. All right. I think we're all set. So thank you for joining. Sorry we had a little blip in the Wi-Fi, but we'll be back in about 15 minutes or so. And Barb and Ethan are up next. Take care.